So yesterday we explained that even though from the Torah a man is allowed to marry two wives, it doesn't seem to have been the recommended approach of the Torah. And this is why Rabbeinu Gershom, 1,000 years ago, made a harem that a man should not marry two wives. And we explained yesterday various reasons for this. Now, the question is it binding? Who is it binding upon? And you may be thinking, who cares? Because nowadays, anyway, most of us live in countries where bigamy is illegal. So in any case, it's irrelevant. But it's not, and we'll see there are important ramifications still of this today. So, firstly, geographically, Rabbeinu Gershom lived in northern France, in Germany. To what extent was his harem, was his takana, was his ban accepted amongst Jews across the world? So the Rashba already writes that his takana was only for his place, and he says it didn't spread in other places. And he writes even in Provence, even there, which is relatively close, leave aside the Jews living in the Middle Eastern countries or in Spain, etc. Certainly, he says even in Provence, this takana for Ben Gershom was not accepted. And indeed, and the Rambam, he codifies that it's permissible for a man to marry two wives, and he makes no mention at all of Rabbeinu Gershom's takana, which seems to have been in the Rambam's area. It was certainly seemed to have been acceptable to do so. And indeed, the Shulchan Aruch, when he codifies this, he brings Rabbeinu Gershom, he tells us about what he did, but then he writes very clearly, "V'lo pashta takanato b'chol ha'aratzot." It didn't spread. And the Rama says, no, it spread everywhere unless you know if for sure it hasn't spread. But that's point number one. To what extent did it spread? And the Shulchan Aruch seems to be saying it didn't spread everywhere, not in the countries beyond the Rabbeinu Gershom's locality. But nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch himself says in the next paragraph, he says it's good for a person not to marry a second wife. So he seems to be saying that although the harem, the strict ban of Rabbeinu Gershom doesn't apply if a man marries two wives, but it's not the recommended route. Now, the second major question with this is, how long is this a never-ending harem? Is this a never-ending takana, a ban which lasts forever? It raises difficulties in terms of how can someone be, after the Talmud, make something forbidden which is permissible in the Torah? And the Rashba, again, he writes that this takana of Rabbeinu Gershom was only intended when he instituted it to extend till the end of Elef HaHamishi, to the end of not 1,000 years, it's a mistake people make, but to the end of 5,000, i.e. the beginning of 6,000. We're now in the year of 786, right? And so that's and the Rabbeinu Gershom's takana was about in 5785, and the Rashba says that his takana was only till the end of 5,000 years, i.e. till the year 6,000, which would mean approximately 1240 CE the ban ceased to be in effect. And the Shulchan Aruch rules similarly, and in fact he writes elsewhere that an Ashkenazi who've accepted the Rabbeinu Gershom, that's from Germany and France, they've accepted the Rabbeinu Gershom, who has moved to a Sephardi country, is allowed to marry two wives. And he writes, he writes himself, there was an incident in Yerushalayim in which an Ashkenazi person came there and he married two wives and he was allowed to do so. And he writes that in Salonika and Constantinople, and many of these places, it was common for Ashkenazim. No one ever complained when Ashkenazim came to these countries and married two wives. So very clearly, the Shulchan Aruch is of the opinion that even those who did accept Rabbeinu Gershom is seized at 1240, at the beginning of the Hebrew year 6000. The Rama disagrees with this, and the Rama says, even if you want to say that's true, but nonetheless, the Ashkenazim have accepted it upon themselves as a minhag, as a custom. It may no longer be a harem, may no longer be a ban, but it's the accepted custom not to marry two wives. And therefore he says it's absolutely not allowed because of the custom to do so. Whether Rabbeinu Gershom's takana lasted beyond 1240 or not is irrelevant, because even if it didn't, it continues to be enforceable through the power of minhag. But there are ramifications, maybe we'll touch on later, to the fact that it's a minhag and not a real harem. So that's the two major questions. Firstly, geographically, and secondly, time-wise. We're seeing that the Shulchan Aruch and the Rashba take on that it was a local harem in France and Germany, and it was intended to only be for a certain period of time.